everybody, this is Everyday Commentary, and this is a video about Zero Tolerance knives. Zero Tolerance brand started out as a high-end brand for Kai USA. Kai USA is a subsidiary of Kai, which is a Japanese company that makes edge tools of all kinds. They make everything from hair cutting shears down to industrial cutters. And Kai bought Kershaw from Pete Kershaw, and they incorporated a couple of Japanese ideas into the company, and later on they wanted to have a company that made more expensive, higher-end, bulkier knives that were made entirely in the United States, and out of that came Zero Tolerance. And Zero Tolerance's claim to fame has always been big knives, and they've always used high-end custom collaborators. So the first Zero Tolerance knives, the 0200 and the 0300, and 0350, were all designs based on a collaboration between McStrider and Ken Onion, and they were really, really big knives. Even the 350, which is the smallest of those three. And over the years, they've collaborated with Rick Hinderer, which is these two knives, Dmitry Sinkovich, which is this knife, and then they've made a couple of in-house designs. I believe this is the 770. I believe it was designed by one of their in-house guys, Jim McNair. And I think that I've reviewed almost all of Zero Tolerance knives. I've owned many of them, including the 454, which is one of the finest production knives, one of the finest knives I've ever owned, quite frankly. It's just too big. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was sort of the evolution of Zero Tolerance. And if we start here, this is the 562, and it is a big knife. This is a production version of Rick Hinderer's XM18 3.5-inch edition with a slicer grind. You can see the slicer grind there. And this is a very big, very thick, very heavy knife. Much in line with the original ideas for Zero Tolerance seen in the 0200, 0300, 0301, and the 0350. This knife is not out of proportion or outsized by any of those knives. It does run, no longer uses assists, and I think these two might be the last ZTs to run assists. Instead, it relies on a bearing pivot, and it's a caged bearing pivot, the Kershaw Velocity technology, which is basically ball bearings in a plastic housing. And it gives the knives really excellent, just almost automatic-like feel to the flipping action. The knife has the Hinderer over travel. It has a lock bar insert to prevent wear out or sticky lockup. By having the steel insert there and the steel blade, you don't get any of the mushing that gives you a real bad lock stick, like with a traditional titanium frame lock. Overall, I really like this knife. It's just giant. So this get a smaller knife. This is the 566, which is not a manual knife. This is an assisted opener, and this is basically a scaled down version of the 560, which I've also reviewed, and that knife was positively ginormous. It dwarfed this knife, and it rivaled the biggest reasonable production knife I've ever seen. But this knife is heavy. It uses a steel liner or a steel lock side, and it's not exactly on par with this knife, or I'll show you in a second. It's a very good knife. It's a very nice heavy-duty, medium-sized heavy-duty folder. It's got a good deep carry pocket clip. It's just the materials, other than the Elmax steel, are exactly the same as the Cryo G10. I mean, it's exactly the same knife, just slightly bigger and has an Elmax blade. That brings up this knife, and this knife is more, in my mind, more like the new ZT. This is the 770, and it is a knife that has been basically ignored because it was seen as sort of a stripped-down version of the 777, which was a fantastic and really ambitious design by Zero Tolerance. But this knife is thin. I mean, look how much thinner it is than that knife. The knife is thin, and even though it has an assist, it fires smoothly. It has a great blade shape, a great handle shape, and it's really quite light. This is a very, very light knife, thanks to the carbon fiber handles. And let's see if we can get in there. It's almost all carbon fiber. There's just a small lock bar in there, and the lock bar is sort of a subframe lock or a liner lock or a tab lock, whatever you want to call it. But It's a very, very small, very slender knife, even though it has a 3.25-inch blade length. In theory, these two knives have the same blade length, and that's probably true when you measure them, but in hand and in the pocket, this knife seems like it's twice the size of this knife. And so it's nice to see that Zero Tolerance is sort of moving away from these knives that only gorillas could use, to use Derek Bowen's line from the podcast when he's talking about Zero Tolerance knives. This knife is sort of representation of their new area, their new direction. And this knife is the promise of their new direction. And this is the 0450, and it is a Dmitry Senkovich design, and it is a titanium frame lock. It has an over-travel stop built in to the steel insert, which is great. It has a very boring clip, but as you heard on the podcast with Thomas, he could give a shit about pocket clips, and you know, it works. It's not great, it's not bad. One thing that I would note is that it has this really weird tendency to sort of bind up. If you put any pressure on the lock bar, the detent is strong enough to keep the knife from firing. So you're kind of going to get your finger way down there. But what it does is it gives you a zero tolerance knife with the solidity of their designs, with the exclusivity of their custom collaborations, with their premium high-end materials, titanium S35VN. And it gives it to you in a really slender, really light package. This is a 2.9 ounce knife. It's a under 3 ounce knife, and it has all kinds of awesome touches. The polished pivot, the minimized wording and word mark. In fact, when you look at the business side of the knife, the show side of the knife, there's nothing on there. The word mark and the serial number and the model number and the blade steel are on this side, as well as the country of production, which is the United States. This knife is just an insane, insane little knife. And it's something that's unlike in almost every way the ZT of 4 years ago, and even the ZT of today. Like, this knife is like a third the mass of this knife. But it's interesting to see them going in this different direction, and it's really quite delightful. I mean, this knife is $160, and it is easily worth every single penny of that $160. I reviewed the Kizer KI 340403, and it was a titanium flipper with S35VN. It was made in China, and it's $130. For $30 more, you get something made in the United States that I think has a little bit more flair to it, a little bit more of a design flourish. Really good feel in the hand, great, great looking blade. It's got these little red standoffs. I mean, this knife just does everything right, every single thing right. And I hope that ZT continues to make knives like this, the 900 and the 808, all of which are 3.25 inches or smaller. I think the 900 is 2.9 inches and the 808 is 3.25 inches. And all of them are, you know, smaller knives. None of these are tiny. None of these are like dragonfly size. But these are knives that regular everyday people could carry in their pocket. And it's great to see that from Zero Tolerance. So there you go, a little overview of Zero Tolerance. I thought it was appropriate since I have all 4 of these right now. This has already been reviewed, it's scheduled to be given away, and then these 3, the other 3 are in for review. So look for reviews of all these knives shortly. Look for an overview of this one soon. And it's Everyday Commentary, and I will see you